Outlander isn't perfect as a show, nor does it claim to be. And that's why the romantic fantasy drama set in the past, for the most part, has been able to get away with some glaring character and plot flaws. But how many of these flaws are genuine plot holes that fans have given Outlander a free pass on? Today, we'll be discussing 8 of the most glaring and intense plot holes most fans of Outlander didn't notice. First, we have the Druids. Say, what if a show as big as Outlander introduces a significant character archetype in the very first episode of the show and then never mentions it again? This is precisely what happened to the Druids in the show. The Druids were introduced as this seemingly significant group of people who might contribute to the story in a meaningful way. In episode 1, Claire and Frank watched them perform their magical dance that we came to associate with the show's title song as well. They were introduced as beings similar to witches who kept an account of the rituals at the stone circle. The only other time they were mentioned was after Claire landed in 17th century Scotland and was rescued from Jack Randall by Murta. And believe it or not, the Druids haven't been mentioned since then, even though it was suggested that they're somehow at the core of why people are able to travel back in time at all. Up next, Jamie's full name. Now, this is a bit of a novelty plot hole, but it is fun to discuss regardless. The specific plot hole is also a part of season 1, specifically the plot point involving Jamie and Claire's marriage. So at this point in the story, Claire has been through a lot. First, coming to the past through the stones, getting stuck in a timeline where she is under constant threat, both as a woman and as an English person. She's only managed to keep herself alive with a little help from the Highlanders, who also suspect her of being a spy. But she is most under threat to be captured by Jack Randall. That is, unless she marries one of the Highlanders, in this case, Jamie. In the episode titled The Wedding, Claire protests that she cannot marry Jamie for she doesn't even know his real name. And while the argument is logical and somewhat hyperbolic in nature, one can't help but notice that when she went over the marriage contract in the last episode, it very clearly lists both her and Jamie's full real names. So by that logic, she does, in fact, know his real name. Now we have Claire's inconsistency. One of the defining characteristics of Claire as a character is her relentless insistence on not harming another being. Being a healer is one of the most significant traits of her character, and the fact is cemented when she travels back to her present timeline through the stones and becomes a doctor, who then takes an oath to never harm a human being. You can probably guess that this inconsistency is more character-related than plot. In season 2, when Claire realizes that the Battle of Culloden will take place regardless of their attempts to stop it, her first, almost instinctive response is to suggest the cold-blooded murder of Bonnie Prince Charles himself. Now, it doesn't take an Outlander analyst to see why this was a shocking, very out-of-character twist coming from someone like Claire. Now, of course, she was desperate to save Jamie and the rest of the Highlanders, especially since she knew the outcome of the battle. But plotting a whole murder involving a royal prince was still incredibly inconsistent for her as a healer and physician. Up next, Dougal's death. Dougal Mackenzie's character was as complex as one can be, with the rebellion-loving Scot dangling on the edge of being an ally to Claire and Jamie or an outright antagonist. By the end of the second season, though, he'd crossed the line to become a proper antagonist to the pair. For that reason, James impulsively and in some form of self-defense kills his uncle. Claire, of course, was complicit in this murder. Now, as we mentioned before, although Claire's first idea was to murder the Bonnie Prince, the couple could not go along with it due to their personal morals. The pair didn't believe themselves capable of such ruthlessness. So it was definitely very sketchy and plot-wise flawed that Jamie and Claire would just straight up kill him, even if he wasn't the most ethically sound of men. And since he was related to Jamie, it had once helped the pair out a ton, even if for his own selfish motives. Now we have Leary's clunky storyline. There's a lot that Outlander has been critiqued on, but more than anything, it should be criticized for its insistence on bringing back characters with fulfilled storylines back to the show solely for shock value. Leary, for example, lies on top of this metaphorical list. The hateable, naive character who'd caused a lot of misery to both Jamie and Claire in the past was reintroduced after Claire came back to the past to reunite with Jamie. Except there was no real reason for her to be in the situation she was in, and it was solely used as a plot point to cause Claire pointless suffering. It turned out that Jamie had married Leary in the 20-something years that the pair had been separated, but the marriage was never truly actualized, since Jamie wasn't fond of her for obvious reasons, nor did he share a house with her. And long after this painfully unnecessary arrangement, he simply abandoned her, and their marriage was nullified. This arrangement succeeded in doing nothing but perhaps transforming Leary from an intensely hated character to one who is now pitied and a victim of Jamie's indecision. Up next, the witch trials. The reason for Leary being so intensely hated, rather than just being seen as a naive young girl with an intense crush on Jamie, was that she sent Claire to the stake quite literally. Leary accused both Galus, Duncan at the time, and Claire of witchcraft and sorcery, which resulted in some of the most memorable episodes of the first season. But here's the thing, witch trials weren't a thing that existed in 1747, and this is a huge inconsistency, seeing as Outlander prides itself on including historical events into the show's plot organically. The last witch executed in Scotland was 1707, a whole generation before Claire, and witch trials in general were abolished sometime in 1727. Attitudes around witch hunting had also begun to change, with only the lowland Scots moderately participating in them. So it was not common at all in the Highlands, where Claire was living at the time, for people to be so intense about witch hunting at all. Now we have the timeline inconsistency. After Jamie had been assaulted by Black Jack Randall in Wentworth Prison, both Claire and Jamie escaped to France to start a new life, but not before Jamie vowed to kill Jack Randall for his crimes. But since Claire's husband in the future, Frank, is a direct descendant of Jack Randall, Claire begs him not to kill the cruel redcoat, for the ripple effect may turn out to be too strong. And also, she did want her first husband to be born. But this is where a timeline error occurs. Claire hints that Randall will die sometime in 1745, but at the same time, she knew he would die in Culloden in 1746. So by that logic, Randall would have to die twice. When Jamie challenges Jack Randall to a duel in the spring of 1744, Claire begs him to give Randall a year and not a day more, but she already knew he would die on April the 16th, 1746. By that math, Frank would not have been conceived for months after this one-year time cap Claire had given Jamie. Up next, Galus, Duncan, and more inconsistencies. One of the most interesting characters from season 1 was Galus Duncan, the one person Claire manages to truly befriend in the Highlands. But the last we see of her in season 1 was when she was being manhandled to the stake to be burned as a witch. And here's where the plot hole comes in. Galus suddenly makes a reappearance in season 3 as quite the antagonistic character. Her very clear death sets both Jamie and Claire on a significant path, so the fact that it was reversed is a questionable directorial choice in the first place. But the way it was refuted adds insult to the injury. According to Galus, Dougal had apparently found another corpse to replace her with, and she'd been able to escape after all. But that does not go in line with what viewers had seen happening in the episode at all. But that's not the only weird half-true explanation the writers have managed to give us for truly inexplicable scenes added to the show. For example, when in the very first episode, Frank Randall sees Jamie through Claire's window, it had been very clearly dark out, and the distance between them was a great ton. So realistically, he should have only managed to see a red-haired man dressed in traditional Scottish attire, but in the Polish sketch, he seemed to have known this stranger's eye color and even his complexion. And that's all for this video. Did you notice any of these plot holes and inconsistencies in Outlander? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed watching the video, be sure to leave a like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications by pressing the bell icon to get notified every time we post a new video. And we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.